What's up, y'all? Today is our last episode of season 3 for the spring, before I take a little break this summer to be with baby. And this was such a treat. I've been waiting a while to get to talk to Jennie Allen. I'm sure you're familiar with her. She is a Bible teacher, writer, speaker. She's the founder of If Gathering and New York Times best-selling author. This is her 7th book, Untangle Your Emotions, Naming What You Feel and Knowing What to Do About It. Don't we all need a lesson in this? So this came out earlier this year, and I'm so grateful to have had a little bit of her time before going into the summer to get to talk to her about her sort of personal journey toward, as we hit on, like the impulse from saying I think to I feel. There was a really poignant moment for her, which I can totally empathize with, and what it means to approach feelings and difficulties in relationships and conversations with people from a place of I feel versus I think, and what that does in your mind and your heart and your spirit, and why those things matter, and why big emotions are not just, things that we're supposed to manage or control. They're not things that should be kept outside of the church or outside of our time with the Lord, but actually that God, above all people, wants to invite us into those places. He wants to come into those places with us, and just how radically our relationships, both with him and with our people, change when we learn to untangle and share these emotions. So I know y'all will love her. It was such a treat to get to talk to her. If you haven't ordered the book, it is for anyone and everyone. So go check out Untangle Your Emotions and enjoy this last interview for a couple months with my new friend, Jennie Allen. Thank you for hopping on remote. I know I missed you when you were in Nashville. I was so bummed. I think you
No
had travel
worries.
issues, and I'm
Yes, I
just glad we
know.
could make it work. I know it's a little later than planned. So,
No worries. Thank you for having me.
all right, well, we'll jump in. I'm so excited to talk about the book. I mean, I read it when it came out, so I had to go back through all my notes today. But all right, well, Jennie, I am so thankful to get to talk to you. We were just saying we miss each other in Nashville, but you're gracious to give me your time from, I don't know where you are, maybe home in Texas, maybe traveling, but I'm just thankful to have you and get my listeners a little bit to know you more personally.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Maddie.
Yeah, yeah. As I said, I'm in Nashville, and because of that, because I grew up here, and because the show's all about joy, I don't music brings me a lot of joy. So how I love to sort of just start the show and get to know people is if you had a walkout song, or like a song playing that describes where you are in life right now, what would that song be?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Well, I mean, the greatest song that I would want to walk out to is how it will fit well with your show is because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel song. That is a
Yeah,
good song to walk out
perfect.
to. I want that to be my song, but certainly, as we're going to talk about today, that's not the only emotion I feel on a given day. But I do feel really blessed, and I do feel like there's a lot I'm really grateful for in my life right now. So I think it's fitting today.
I think that's perfect. And if anything, just start your day that way, and maybe you'll
Right.
veer toward
Right.
joy throughout the course of your day.
Yes.
Well, also funny Tennessee connection. You were just, I think, at my alma mater in Knoxville, like
Oh yeah.
as we're recording, right, sometime in May, right?
Oh, it's fantastic. Yes.
With Unitas.
Yes, it was fantastic. We've been going around to different campuses and talking about faith and a relationship with God. And it's been so cool to see kids' response. I mean, it's wild. Like in all these secular universities, we'll have anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 kids come for a free event. And it's just been so fun. And we've had a really special time.
No, it looks incredible. Is that has that been
Oh
within the
yeah.
last year or two? Okay, that's what I
Oh
thought, the
yeah.
Unitas sort of
I'd say less than the
tour, so to
last
speak.
year. Yeah. I mean, it was just an event that we did at Auburn. My friend Tanya Pruitt invited me. This was her vision, her dream. We came. In fact, we were a little bit cynical, just candidly, me and Jonathan Pokluda, who are the speakers. We were like, gosh, how many people are going to be there? It was just a free event on a random Tuesday, Wednesday night. She had
Yeah.
never hosted an event before. We thought no one would come. And instead, over 6,000 kids came. And
Wow.
we ended up sharing Jesus and baptizing into the night spontaneously because people want to get baptized. It was just an insane experience. And so all of a sudden, all these campuses are calling and saying, we want you to come here. And it's specifically student led. So students are
It's
calling and
amazing.
us, and it's just been really fun.
That's so
Quite an
cool.
adventure.
Do you have like the rest of 24 kind of booked
But
out? Like just
yeah,
go
pretty
as you
much.
go?
We have so many students that have reached out from all over the country and even abroad. And so we are just taking it as it comes, and most of these events have been planned by students within 4 to 6 weeks, and so we certainly have about 5 or 6 I think lined up this fall. And yeah, it's such an adventure. It's crazy. I mean, I book my calendar way in advance, like a year or two
Sure.
years in advance
Yeah.
sometimes. And so I mean, people have been so gracious because I've actually had to change plans just because I feel like right now this is just where I'm supposed to be. And people have been so wonderful. They're like, yes, come late to our event. Like you have to go there. You know, you
Yeah.
have to keep doing this.
Wow.
So
That's
I've
amazing.
definitely I just feel like it is just so near and dear to my heart. I feel like they are hungry, like kids. I think where this generation is they've just had it all. Like they've had it all in their
Mm.
pockets since they were young, and they're burnt out, and they want something that gives them hope, and they want peace. And it's just, it's been really sincere and beautiful.
That's amazing. That's so cool to see. I mean, I haven't been there in, close to 15 years, but it's to know that that hunger is there on these huge campuses, as you said, a lot of secular campuses, and
Yeah.
that students are taking on that workload of making it happen. Like that
Yeah.
speaks for itself. So I was just
Yeah,
pretty
it
blown
does.
away by it. I'm excited
Thanks.
that's a lot of what's taken up your time. And
It
and
is.
also saw recently, I don't know that this is college age, but I would love to hit on it for parents, especially who have teenage kids. You have a new book, right? That's sort of like a
Yeah.
compilation of your two past books for kids. I don't know what age group. Can you touch on
Yeah,
that real quick
it's
though?
about age 7 or 8 to 13 or 14.
Okay, yeah,
And
so
it's
young.
just a simpler version. And we actually interviewed and talked to tons of kids in that age group and heard
Cool.
their stories and what they're struggling with, and applied it to the content that I'd written for Get Out of Your Head and Find Your People.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had asked me, would you please make a book for my 10-year-old, for my 12-year-old that they can read? And so it's really
Mm,
short and simple and has lots of activities and response in it. And I just felt like I get it. I've been a parent
mm,
of kids that are just spinning out and anxious. And so Get Out of Your Head has, I think it's sold like 1.5 million books. It's wild. And it has reached a lot of people, and I know it's helped people, but I also know like 10-year-olds are struggling with the same thing.
mhm,
And so it felt important to do it, and it's
yeah.
taken us a while to get it right, but I really am so proud of this book. I feel like it is, what's so funny is I really feel like it's almost like if your brain can't handle a whole book, this is honestly, I think any age range could read it, because it's just the most simple truths, and
Mm,
it helps you. It just peels back anything that's complicated. And it just is, this is how we walk through our mind, and the battle for our mind, and all the thoughts, and the racing thoughts, and the overwhelmed thoughts, and the lonely thoughts. Like, what do we do with all of that? And I just try to keep it so super simple. And
yeah.
yeah, sometimes that's kind of what you need. All of us need, right? And when everything's spinning out.
Man, that's so good. I was really excited to see that. And is it out now or is it like pre-order?
It's going to be out in a few weeks. So it's called You Are Not Alone: A Kid's Guide to Navigating Anxious Thoughts.
Awesome. I'm so happy to share that with people. I know there's a lot of parents in that age range
Yeah,
in our community. So it's amazing. And you mentioned Get Out of Your Head, which was your book prior to Untangle Your Emotions, which we're going to talk about. But do you mind kind of like giving us sort of the background on the two? Like I've sort of heard you talk
sure.
about the fact that they're a little bit complementary, so to speak, and just kind of
Yeah,
like what the timing in your own life of those two messages.
right. So at this point in my life, I would want every single person to read both, because they are very different. One of the books is actually based on a type of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy. And then I walked through a season of working through my emotions with Untangle Your Emotions. And I still stand by every single word and Get Out of Your Head. It's all true. It's all helpful. But what about when you can't control your thoughts? What about when you feel overtaken by sadness and you're like, I am doing my best to be grateful and not sad, but it's not working. And I just feel like where Get Out of Your Head leaves off, Untangle Your Emotions picks up, because there are times and seasons where
Mm.
it doesn't matter what you're telling yourself to think about or not think about, because we do have a lot of dominion and power over our thoughts. We're still spiraling. We're still out of control, and we're still feeling all
Yeah,
of these,
yeah.
what we consider negative emotions. So I hope that if anybody gets to the end of Get Out of Your Head and you're like, it's not working, that this would feel like a
Yeah.
great comfort, because it wasn't working for me either. I mean, I got to a point post-COVID. So Get Out of Your Head was written pre-COVID. Untangle Your Emotions was really my journey and experience on the other side. And like so many of us just had, so many emotions that eventually I just had to shut them
Mm.
down and feel numb, because I just couldn't. At some point, I think we were so, if you can go back and even remember the early days of watching the numbers of cases on the news, and that's all that was on, we all were just glued to our televisions, and you're thinking about your parents, and you're thinking about your kids, and you're thinking about the future, because that's all you had time to do, because we were all shut down. If you can
Mm.
go back to that and remember the feelings that you had, I think we all just got burnt out on feelings. We were,
Mhm.
I think someone coined the term, we were languishing. And I think that article blew up everywhere because
Mm.
everyone related to it. It was deeper than worried. It was like, no, we're
Yeah.
languishing, like, together. And so when you come out eventually of that, I think a lot of us came out and kind of just shut down our emotions, because you have to. I mean, that's actually
Mhm.
not the worst thing. It's actually a kind of natural response to being overwhelmed. That's how Navy SEALs get through. It's how people
Yeah.
face unthinkable difficulty. You have kind of a button in your brain that you can actually kind of switch off and quit feeling. But the problem with that, when you go for a long time and don't feel, then you're really missing your life, and you're really
Mm.
disconnected from the people you love. And you begin to feel disconnected from God, and you begin to feel disconnected even from your own heart. And
Mhm.
so that was me. I was in that place. I was burnt out. I was kind of apathetic. I wasn't, um, I just wasn't super passionate about things that I'd used to be passionate about. I wasn't super sad, and I wasn't super angry. I wasn't super anything. And so I walked into a group that I got invited to that was kind of like a little therapy group, counseling group. And I wasn't that excited about that part of it, but I was very excited about being with the people I love and sharing life together. So I showed up, and I knew that the assignment was to bring your whole heart and all your emotion. And I was like, I don't really want to do it. I remember I often approach those situations with my arms crossed and kind of leaning back. But I
Yeah.
mean, when it was my turn, I really did it, and I shared everything. And
Mm.
candidly, it didn't go very well. I felt like people misunderstood me. It was hard. And I ended up being honest about that and just saying, I feel misunderstood, and
Mm.
I feel hurt. I feel judged right now. And that moment opened a whole new way of doing relationships and doing emotions.
Mm.
And it really brought us all closer. What typically would have pushed me away brought me in closer to these people, and them to me. And to this day, they are some of my very best friends. We're still doing this monthly. It's just, we get on and we
It's cool.
share life together. And it so transformed my life and my relationship with emotions that I felt like I wanted to talk about it and share it with other people.
Yeah, that's really great. I empathize with that a lot. I mean, certainly from the COVID era, but just having that bend in general, that sort of, I feel like as I read through the book, especially, which we'll talk about, the sort of 5 steps I think are super practical for people. People tend to, I think, veer more toward one way or the other. The like, okay, I can suppress is a strong word, but like I can
Yeah.
control this. I can choose what I'm going to do with it, but I'm not going to feel it. Or I'm going to feel everything and be a victim to it, and I have no choice in the matter. So I think the fact that tend to err toward the one that is more like, I can control what I do with this, to watch your process in that specific group and moment was really powerful. And I remember reading, I think you saying specifically, I don't know if it was in that moment or in a therapy somewhere else, but literally just shifting your language from I think to I feel was like a
Right.
very tangible step that made
Yeah.
that changed everything for you. And it's like that we don't even think how simple like the semantics of that are.
Well, yeah, and how profound. So what those words do when you change your response to someone. So if someone's sharing emotion with you, which was what I was doing with them that day, and they kind of went into, I think you should, I think God is like this, I
Mm-hmm.
think you shouldn't, all these words. When, and believe me, I have used those words on people my whole life.
Yeah.
So let's be real. Like what was powerful about that moment was I was experiencing what it felt like, and it didn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why that moment was so profound to me. I had been doing that to people all my life and still can kind of accidentally fall into that. So
Yeah.
what happens though when you change the language? And so the counselor that was there with us just said, "Hey, Jennie," he could tell in my eyes that I was withdrawing. And he said, "How do you feel right now?" And I said, "Honestly, I feel ticked." I think I use stronger language. I feel um, I feel isolated. I feel misunderstood. I feel judged. And I said all those things. And all of a sudden, that was brave. I mean, right? Like normally you
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say
Yeah.
that. You would just be like, "I'm fine."
Yeah.
That's what you
It's
say. "I'm
just
fine.
uncomfortable. Like, yeah.
Okay." Yeah. But I really went for it and I said all the things. And they, in that moment, I think their response was so beautiful. And he said, "I don't want
Mm-hmm.
you to say what you think. I want you to say what you feel." And they said, "I feel sad that we just hurt you, that we pushed you away. I feel disappointed that you felt so alone in your work and how you've been living. And I feel proud of you that you have stuck with it and you haven't quit God and you haven't quit the work he's given you." So that was a whole different, all of a sudden I'm melting. Like I'm not angry anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
just feel so seen and loved. And so it was so transformative. And what I've studied and learned since, because a lot of my work, I'll do a lot of deep diving into the science and the research. And when you actually say "I feel" versus "I think," it activates the other side of your brain that is more the relational connected part. So you actually are moving. When you have to identify a feeling that you're feeling, it literally moves your brain into a different mode. And that
That's
mode was
amazing.
built and put there by God to actually help you connect with other people. So it
Mm-hmm.
really is amazing. It's a great feature, right? That we
Yeah.
can do
It's
that
a
for
great
people. So
feature.
I think, no, I think we tend to think, "What's the point? Like, actually,
Yeah.
how's that even helpful?" And why should I feel sad with you? I don't understand how that's going to help anybody. Like, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I'll
Mm.
tell you how. This is going to be actually some good advice. Let me fix you. And that's what our brain, that's a lot easier place for us to stay. It's way less
For sure.
vulnerable. It is way less painful, safe. It protects us. It potentially protects them, we think. But it actually is missing the whole point, which is,
Mm.
the Bible says, "Mourn with those who mourn." Well, how interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it say that? What good is that? Well, it actually heals your brain. And we know that even in the
Mm.
last 20 years, what we've learned about the brain, our neural pathways begin to rebuild and to heal when we experience our pain, even if it's in the past tense, even if it's pain that happened 20 years ago to you.
Mm-hmm.
When you share that with somebody and they feel sad with you and they enter that pain with you, now you are no longer alone in that pain and you have someone to share that pain with. Well, that heals your brain. So what was
Mm.
said in the Bible thousands and thousands of years ago actually is the neuroscience today that
Yeah.
we understand that begins to connect you to other people and begins to heal your brain. So it really is helpful. And I had to hear that because
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't see the point. I
Yeah.
had to understand it's helpful. Like your brain is actually it's helping you and it's helping them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that struck home with me in a really profound way too. And I think that's what's cool is it's not just like, for example, my very best friend is a therapist. And so it's like she's always pushing me in that
Nice.
way, in that friendly way. Yeah, it's pros and cons. I love her. Um, but it's like for me, I kind of needed to know the payoff. Like as bad as that sounds, it's like what you said. It's like, why do I just want to feel sad? And I don't want to get stuck there. And it's like you talk in the book about, the physical ramifications that come, from not feeling our emotions. That's very real. I think one of the first books is The Body Keeps the Score. One of the bigger books on that, speaks to that from
Yeah.
years and years ago. And then
Yeah.
obviously, like you hit on relationally, we're just missing out on that connection in a big way. And then even you talk about like, I think that the psychology shows that our emotions are connected to our motivation systems too. It's just like there's all of these really tangible reasons besides, you just should feel the full spectrum of how God made you to feel, that are really good reasons to learn how to untangle your emotions. I mean, it's like a sales
Well,
pitch for it, but it's true.
oh, I'll make a sales pitch. Here we go.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to know why. I get that. I think
Yeah.
we see emotion as dangerous because we see people that just are so emotional, and we don't want to be that. And,
Mm.
and to those of you that would put yourself in that category, I would just say this, like that, you're probably closer to health than those of us that suppress it. Now, I don't think feeling our
Yeah.
emotions and making them your God on earth is a healthy way to live, because
Mhm.
our emotions can totally lead us off cliffs. So we don't, we're supposed to, every therapist will tell you, you're supposed to submit your emotions to your will. Like, you're supposed to make healthy, good decisions with your mind,
Mhm.
but you're supposed to factor in what your emotions are telling you. Our emotions often are
Right.
telling us really true things. In fact, sometimes they're telling us things we don't even know in our conscious mind that are going on, whether
Mhm.
it's a memory from when we were 5, and every time our husband talks to us that way, we feel defensive because all of our life we had to defend ourselves against, abuse, or even just anger in our home. So our
Mm.
emotions are actually telling us something maybe even more true and real than what our mind even knows. So I would just say there's a lot of weight that should be given to our emotions, but not
Mm.
ultimate weight, not
Right.
decision-making weight, right? So where does this all work itself out? And I would just say, first you have to feel it, and we can talk about these 5 steps, but ultimately there's a gift in it that we find when we're not too afraid of it, because
Mm.
it is it's funny. I've learned to cry a lot more. We're going through something difficult right now in our family. And somebody said the other day, your skin looks good. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. Because I haven't taken care of my skin at all. But I've been crying a lot lately. Like, I wonder if that's why my skin looks good. Like, if crying actually,
Wow.
I don't think it does. But I'm like, literally, I don't have another, like, I barely am like
Mhm.
working out right now, or able to eat right, or able to like put on skin lotion or anything. Like, but I've been crying a lot. And, I do think there is something healing about it. So the sales pitch
Mm.
I would give is that when you let these things out, when you actually feel them, when you're not afraid to feel them, you actually feel them, and you feel them in the way we're going to talk about, which I do believe there's some guidelines to it.
Yeah.
Although we all know there's got to be a lot of grace for how each of us does this, because it can be a big mess. But I do think that on the other side is less anxiety. I think
Mm.
there's less fear, there's less anger, because
Mm.
now sometimes we need those feelings too. I'm not saying that, but when
Mm.
we actually feel these things and let it out in the way we're supposed to, they're not pin up. And maybe, I mean, genuinely, maybe my skin does look better because I'm not holding everything in, and I'm not tensing everything. So, I think there's something about cathartic about just feeling what we are feeling and not judging it.
Mhm.
And I feel way more peaceful than I've ever felt in my
Mm.
life.
It's
And
good.
I think I'm also more sad, and I'm also sometimes
Mhm.
um, more worried about things, but I'm talking about it, and I'm not holding
Mhm.
it in.
Yeah, that's amazing that you can say, "I feel more sad, and yet I feel more peaceful."
I do.
Um,
Yeah.
that's amazing. That's amazing. I think too, before I jump into the steps, I just would love to hear from you, because you are a Bible teacher, and I think ultimately a lot of your writing started from Bible studies, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just I want to hear why emotion, why have we sometimes assumed, especially in the church, that emotions, like you said, even bad emotions, quote
Yeah.
unquote, why are they not bad? And I think at what point, as believers, do we need to, what's the line between them being something that is helpful, that is a tool that brings
Yeah.
peace, and then, them becoming sinful or controlling us?
Well, my theology is just based on the fact that they cannot be bad because God feels them. So
Yeah.
that's the bottom line theology on
Mm-hmm.
that. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. You see throughout Genesis to Revelations, you see a God who feels. He feels
Yeah.
every emotion. He, even in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus felt fear. It says that he
Mm-hmm.
was what the Greek word is translated most often fear and anxiety. So he was facing the
Mm-hmm.
cross and facing his death that was coming. And he felt, it says that he sweated to the point that it was as if he was sweating blood. So there was definitely, I mean, how can you be sweating that profusely
Yeah.
and not be feeling anxious? Like, that's the right word for it. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, God feels all the emotions. So they can't be bad in themselves, or what would we do with that fact from God? Now, what happens is, are they controlling our lives? And if they're
Mm-hmm.
controlling your life, then I would just say that's where God is asking you to come to him with them. But what's happened is, in our, whether it was the way we were parented or our church, or even just messages from the world, we get the message that we shouldn't feel this way. How often do you hear those words? Like, you shouldn't
Right.
feel this way. You shouldn't feel sad. I was even thinking about kids throwing tantrums. I remember throwing a tantrum in the grocery store, and I remember getting pinched, I remember that feeling. I was probably 2 or 3. And so we all, have done that as a parent. We've all, it's happened to us as a kid. And I would just say, even like the kid in Target throwing the tantrum, at 3 years old, they're not getting what they want. And we would all say, like, get over it. Like, this is life and you're being a brat, right? That's what we would say in our head, and stop.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to pinch them. But that 3-year-old has no perspective. They don't have that perspective. All they know is they want something and they're not getting it, and they don't understand why. And so to
Mm.
cry like that is just, they don't have a boundary. They're not judging themselves. They're not saying to themselves, gosh, you shouldn't feel that way yet. They're just feeling what they feel. And I'm not advocating for tantrums everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there's probably, if we could approach that child in a way that
Mm-hmm.
we would love to be approached, which is just, man, you know what? The fact that your husband just got that diagnosis, that sucks. And I am
Mm.
so sorry. And man, that's not fair. And yes, maybe it's a toy at 3, but it's the same feeling. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we never learned to deal with it. We never learned. We just
Mm.
learned we shouldn't feel it. So we
Yeah.
stop feeling. And then when we come to something where we're like, maybe I shouldn't feel this, but I feel it. Maybe I shouldn't be depressed
Mm-hmm.
or shouldn't be anxious about this, but I am. And then we don't know what to do. And so I would just say, what if we had that all wrong? And it's like, of course you feel that way, rather than you
Mm.
shouldn't feel that way. What if it was, of
Yeah.
course you feel angry. Of course you feel disappointed, kid. Of
Yeah.
course you want that thing. Yes, I like that toy too. I wish I could have that. Of course you feel that way, kid. And I get that you're sad right now, and I'm sorry. And I wish I could get you everything that you want, but that wouldn't make me a good mom.
Mm.
And I think something about that little speech that we could give our kids, that we don't usually, but we could. I think as adults, we're craving that as well. I mean, we all
Yeah.
want that compassion and that grace. Of course, we feel difficult emotions. We're living in a
Mm-hmm.
very difficult world, and I don't think God is sitting there massively disappointed in you know, our crying and even our
Mm-hmm.
anger at some of the
Mm-hmm.
injustice in the world. I think he's like, I get it. I feel that way
Yeah.
too with you. And I think it's just a whole different way to look at God. One thing I'll do with people a lot of times in rooms when I'm there is just have them close their eyes and imagine that God's sitting right across from them, and just to
Mm.
picture him and to say to him, like, everything they're feeling, even if they're mad at him, like,
Yeah.
just to say it.
Yeah.
And then to imagine, how is he looking back at them? And usually at that point, people just start weeping,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
they realize, of course he's not mad at me. Like,
Yeah.
of course he is tender. Of course he is loving. Of course
Mm.
he's compassionate to me. And it's just a big lie that we've made God into this judge that's just sitting over us with his finger pointed down at us and angry at us about everything. When the reality is, it says that he is not a high priest that is unable to empathize with our
Mm-hmm.
weakness. That he is a kind priest that feels what we feel. And I just always think, if you think of God as a disappointed father, you're never going to go in that room. You're never going to want to sit down and talk to him. Who wants to
Yeah.
go in the room of a disappointed dad? You avoid that room. You
Yeah.
try to sneak out without him seeing you, not calling you in. But if he's not disappointed, if he is the greatest counselor and friend and pastor and empathizer with you, you want to go to that room. And so
Yeah.
my hope is that we would see that God, that we would realize that he's actually wanting to connect with us over our fear and our sadness and our anger. And he wants to be in it with us.
Yeah, that is so good. And that's such a powerful picture that you're talking about, that you lead people there. And I've had such personal experiences like that, that just, it's like his grace for you then gives you that permission to have that grace with yourself, kind of thing. Or at least for me, that's what I needed. Like, I needed to picture
Yeah.
him with tears coming down for me, and
Yes.
saying, like, I get, like, of course you're heartbroken. Look at what you're dealing with. And also,
Right.
like, I'm not going to leave you here.
Yeah.
And just kind of
Yeah.
that tender father relationship, like you said, versus the disappointed father. And I just appreciate so much too. You've said in the book, like, those feelings, while we don't need to stay there, we also shouldn't try to wish them away or pray them away. Like, that isn't the valiant way. That isn't the super spiritual way to deal with it. And I think just, I needed to hear that. I think a lot of people's hearts need to hear that. Like, there is a spiritual element, as you just described, to inviting God into our pain. That spiritual element of dealing with our emotions isn't praying that they go away. I
Yeah.
appreciated you hitting on that.
Yeah, I mean, the old saying, there's just, you can't go around them, you can't go over them, you can't go
Yeah.
under them, you got to go through them. And the reality is, when you go through them, God is there. He is helping
Mm-hmm.
you. He's walking with you. He's not surprised. And I mean, I think the most of us that feel close to God would say our relationship was built in that difficulty. And so we don't want to avoid the thing that
Mm-hmm.
actually is going to cause us to have deeper relationships and deeper connection to each other and to God. So, that is my sales pitch. I think we all are craving a deeper way, like deep connection with people. And we don't need each other in the way that we used to physically. Like, used to,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
communities stood together and they planted and they harvested together and they hunted together and they depended on each other for life. And now it's like, we can Amazon all that. How do we need each other? Well, we emotionally are the most
Yeah.
depressed, anxious, lonely generation on earth. So we do need each other. We just need
Mm-hmm.
each other for this kind of thing. And my girlfriends and I, this is what we do. We will text each other and say, "What are you doing? Let's go meet right now. Somebody's life is on fire," and
Yeah.
we will drop everything. We will show up 15 minutes later. We'll be
That's
over
great.
at a local place, and we'll be sharing and crying and pouring our hearts out to each other. And we've learned that sharing that burden, whatever it
Mm.
is just makes it doable. It makes it
Yeah.
worth living. It makes us be able to breathe and exhale,
Mm-hmm.
because we cry together and because we show up together. And we have this one place we go, and the servers know us all, and they just laugh at us because we almost always are crying. We almost
Yeah.
always are, there for hours and hours. But it really is the only way I can make it through anymore. That really is the greatest gift.
No, it's so good. And that relational depth, whether with the friends or with
Yeah.
the Lord, like, that's where the peace comes from, that you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier.
Well, we're all craving that.
Um,
Right.
for
But we
sure.
have to
For
build it.
sure.
That was a different book. Find Your People. You can pick that one
Yeah.
up, because
Yeah.
a lot of people find that hard, and I get that. So I wrote a whole book about that, because I found that hard as well. I think most of the writing I do in life is because I'm not very good at basic things that I have to learn. So
But those are the best messages, because it means all the rest of us aren't good at it either.
crazy. Well, it always crazy. It's like, yeah, this is hard for everybody, or people wouldn't be so lonely.
No, for sure, for sure. Well, can you run us through sort of your 5 steps,
Yeah.
how to untangle your emotions? Yeah.
So simple. So, it's almost nearly elementary. And my thoughts on that is just, we never learned it though. Nobody ever really taught it to
Mm-hmm.
us. So, first you have to notice what you feel. And that sometimes can be the hardest part, to just take inventory and to notice in your body, like, are you anxious? For
Mm-hmm.
me, a lot of times it's my jaw and my
Yeah.
shoulders. I just carry a lot of stress right up here. And so I'll notice that, and I'll have to kind of take some inventory and go, okay, so what's going on? And then to name what we feel and to give it a word. And it might be as simple as sad or fearful, but the better way is to be more descriptive. And so I have in the book several emotions under each big four emotions. I have several specific words. And the reason why is because you could be disappointed because you weren't invited to something, or you could be grieving a death that happened a year ago. And both of those are sad, but disappointment and grief are very different. And so to give it the most specific, granular words you can give it, because that will actually help you be able to feel it and to be able to work through it. And so then you feel the emotion, and that sounds so funny, but for a lot of us, it sounds like you're similar to me. I really
Yeah.
have to choose that. I have to sometimes, like even the last few weeks as we've been going through something difficult, I've had to crawl into my bed and just have a really good cry. Even a few days ago, I spontaneously started crying about it, what we're going through. And I was with my son and my husband. It was so sweet. And we were downstairs watching a game, and we had briefly talked about something that we're going through, and it had made me just uncontrollably cry. And it was so sweet. And I wasn't even looking up. I was just crying, and I was letting them watch the game. This is not how I used to be, by the way. Everybody's like, I'm not buying that book.
Yeah.
But it was so sweet. I actually looked up, and after I kind of composed myself, and they both were just looking at me, and they weren't judging me. They just were sitting there. And I was like, y'all can watch your game. And they're like, it's okay.
Yeah.
But it was sweet because they were sad about the same thing, and they weren't in that moment crying, although I think both of them have. And it was just sweet. It was like, gosh, I'm glad I was downstairs with them crying. I normally would have run upstairs and been embarrassed about it, but it was a moment. And
Yeah.
and it was, I don't know, there was something really sweet of just being sad together in the middle of or it was a basketball game. So yeah, I think feel
Have
it.
you
And then the next thing is,
sorry, not to interrupt, but in the
no, it's
feel it
good.
part, have you found, like, as you've worked to embrace those moments, like the tears while they're looking at you moments, has that made you feel the joy moment bigger? Because I feel like
Absolutely.
that's, again, a sales pitch. That's a payoff that I've experienced.
Payoff. Big
Yeah.
time. When you go numb, I mean, it's interesting. One of the things I researched was it was pictures. I love pictures. It was these pictures of brain scans and people feeling delight or joy and people feeling sadness. It's the same place in your brain. It's the exact, like the same place lights up. So you can't turn it off for one thing. And that made a lot of sense to me. I'd heard that before, but I hadn't seen the work on it. And it just made so much sense when you see both areas lit up. It's the same area. So yeah, you're turning off that center of your brain if you're going to numb it. So you got to be ready to not, if you're not going to feel fear or sadness or anger, you're not going to feel joy either. So that was interesting to me. And absolutely, I feel more joy. I feel more peace. And then the next one is just to share it with people. And I think that's another reason you feel more peace and more joy is because your relationships are going to deepen. If you can find those people and really share life together, those friendships are irreplaceable. They become like family. And those friends have really, truly are like embedded in my heart as my people. And then lastly, you have to choose what to do with it, because for some people, they've been sad for so long. They've been sad for months, maybe even years. And maybe you don't even know you're sad anymore because you've just been sad for so long. It's just the air you breathe. And I think for many people, in doing this process, naming and noticing and actually feeling your feelings, it will open up parts of you and you'll realize, gosh, I need help. Like I'm not functioning well. I haven't been myself for a long time. And maybe one of the choices you need to make is I need to see a doctor. I need to see a counselor. I need to get help. And then for some people, it's just choosing, maybe I feel disappointed in my marriage, but I'm not going to walk away, but I am going to ask for help, or we're going to invite somebody in and we're going to get counseling. That saved my marriage. Doing that. We really, when we took inventory and felt what we were feeling, we were like, this isn't working. Like we aren't in a good place. And it changed our lives. It didn't just change our marriage. It personally changed our lives to get help. And so there's all kinds of choices you might need to make. For me, on a given day these days, it's like, okay, I feel it. I'm shared it. And I'm still going to do what I know is right. And I'm not going to give in to my feelings. I'm going to do what's right. Doesn't mean I don't feel it. Doesn't mean I'm not sad. Doesn't mean I'm not honest about that. but I think it's just such a better, more honest way to live, and yet still submitted to God and to his word, and not to being a jerk, right? I mean, sometimes it's as little as just not being a
Mm-hmm.
jerk. It's like I can be
Yeah.
angry and not be a jerk. That is possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the world knows that. That might be news to everybody. But,
It doesn't
you know,
seem like it's common knowledge sometimes.
yeah. And so it's not just stopping at feeling what you feel and letting anything come out of your mouth. It's actually, no, I'm going to choose
Mm-hmm.
how I respond to this emotion, and what do I need to do because of this. And sometimes it's get help, and sometimes it's just shut your mouth and don't be a jerk. And
Yeah,
still be
yeah.
honest. There's ways to do that, y'all. There's ways to say, you know what, right now, I'm going to use marriage as an example. Honey, right now, I feel hurt by what just happened. And I feel pretty angry about it, candidly. So I think we need a minute. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
hurt you. I don't want this to blow up. So give me an hour or 2 hours, or maybe even tomorrow morning, and let's revisit this and let's talk through it, because I want to be okay with you and I want to work it out. That's a mature, like, that's what happens as you
Mm-hmm.
mature emotionally, as you mature spiritually, you mature
Yeah.
relationally,
Mm.
you mature in every way. And so I think that's the payoff too, is you have more healthy relationships. You have more tools to be able to work through situations that are difficult,
Mm-hmm.
and it brings a richness, I think, to relationships as well.
Yeah, and you sort of touched on at one point in the book, just like the simplicity of inviting God into those moments and those
Yes.
emotions is where you learn that, obviously, spiritual maturity, but emotional maturity. And I think that that also seems maybe obvious, but like, how often are we feeling that and actually stop to like ask Holy Spirit, like, don't let me act on this emotion? Like, is it that simple,
Yeah.
that, you
You
know?
know, every step I just named, I have to invite God into all of them, because sometimes I just don't
Yeah.
even know. It's like at the notice place,
Yeah.
it's like, God, what do I feel? I don't even know. And then
Mm-hmm.
at the naming place, it's like, is this right? And I'm taking it to him. The feeling place, dare I go feel sad alone? I love that God feels with me, that he is empathetic toward
Mm-hmm.
me, that he doesn't abandon me in my sadness, that he's in the pit with me, right? That
Mm.
brings me so much comfort. And then when you share it with someone, I mean, ultimately, God is right in there. Wherever two or three people are gathered, like, he's there. And so he is comforting us as we even share it with each other. And I think some of my most intimate moments are around the deepest emotions I feel with God. And that's what he
For
wants. You
sure.
know, he isn't that disappointed father. He's inviting us into his little study and saying, hey, come share this with me. I want to hear it. And
Yeah.
I want to be there for you in it. And yeah, I just I find such a different relationship with God when I view it that way. And I want to be with him, and I want to share. And it really does change everything.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. I felt all of that. So I hope people hear just the fact that God wants, like you said, he wants to be in those feelings. He created those feelings. Like, he is near to the brokenhearted. He's also a
Yeah.
God who rejoices, and like everything in between, and just the richness of faith that comes from that, and peace that comes from that. It's just super awesome. And it's just a simple thing that we don't think as often as we should. Like, is my first turn to prayer in this moment to just guide
Yeah.
me through what, my neurological, crazy neurological firings are not helping me do. Like, I need the Holy Spirit, and that's not a cop out answer. Like we said earlier, don't pray your emotions away, but like
Right.
pray God into your emotional experience, kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And he wants
Yeah.
that. He
He wants
wants that.
that.
He is near to the brokenhearted. He promises
I
that.
know. Well, I am also curious too. We could go on and on about this, but we talked about your new book. We also, I want to know more about, as we sort of wrap up and think about things on the horizon. Can you tell us about Gather 25? I know it's like
Yeah.
a year or more from now, but you've announced it several months ago.
Yeah. No, it's getting
And
closer.
talking
It's
about
more
all
like
this
9 months.
relational
It's more like
connection.
9 months away now. So yeah, it's coming. But on March 1st, 2025, for really the first time in history, we're inviting the entire global church to come together live for 25 hours. We're going to go live from every continent. We're going to tell the stories of what God is doing on earth. We're going to the global church is going to host the global church. And this came from a dream that I had where I dreamed Jesus was coming back in 10 years, and it wasn't good news. And I felt like I wanted to gather everybody together and decide, what are we going to do? How are we going to love people and show the love of Jesus to people? And so it just made sense to gather everybody. I didn't realize that for the first time in history, when we're going to do it, the technology would make it possible. And so AI is helping us translate live to the entire world from
So
multiple
cool.
languages. So it's just such a beautiful thing. And so we've been all over the world, speaking to pastors and leaders. And, I think people will start hearing more and more about it come fall,
Mhm.
but it's just really fun. And we've seen denominational leaders from all different sides of the church say, yes, we want in.
Mm.
We've seen, different countries say we want to host. And I want you to picture, it'll be such compelling content because it just feels like I'm sitting in the best seat and I'm seeing the greatest movie unfold, hearing all the stories of how God is exploding right now around the world and faith is exploding around the world. And so, I just think about my friend, Pastor Windera, and I asked him, would you host the world from your church? And he took over the church where he became a Christian in the slums of Uganda. And he got sponsored as a kid with Compassion and ended up going to college and moving out of the slums, marrying, having kids. But he wanted to move back
Mm.
to the church where he had become a Christian. And so I want you to picture, like, we drone shot into Uganda, into the slums, into his church, and his church leads a worship song for the world. And so we're going
Mm.
to have so many moments like that just tell the story of so many faithful people around the world.
That's so cool. Truly every nation, tribe, and tongue. Like,
Yep.
that's amazing.
That's where we are
And
today.
so people just follow you to obviously get updates in
Yeah.
the next 9 months
Yeah,
on
you
how to
can
be
go to
involved or follow.
jennieallen.com, JennieAllen.com, but also gather25.com. And it says, there's a button that says I'm in. And all you have to do
Cool.
is fill out just a few things about yourself, and we will send you everything you need to know to invite your church to participate and
Awesome.
your friends and everybody. Hopefully there'll be little gatherings. Our hope is hundreds of thousands of little gatherings in
Hmm.
churches around the world participating.
That's incredible. I mean, it
Yeah.
really is. It just seems like kind of to even on a global scale of the unite us. It's just you're not
Yeah,
even God's just making it happen. Like
it's
it's just
happening. Yeah,
it's
it's beautiful.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for just all your message here. Obviously, is such an invitation for all of us to live richer emotional and spiritual lives. But just like everything you do, you just seem to follow truly the call of God, and He opens
Mhm.
these doors and He makes these things possible.
It's
And
true.
it's
Yeah.
unbelievable. We didn't even touch on If Gathering. I know most people know that's kind of
Yeah.
your baby, but
Yeah.
just I'm thankful for what you do for the local
Thank you.
church and the global church in this way, and it's awesome. So we're so
Well,
grateful. And as we mentioned, your new book, parents go check it out. Man, that's a great resource too.
thank you. Thank you, Maddie. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me. And thank you for what you do too.
Oh, I'm so glad. And just how we simply like to wrap up is just knowing one thing that's bringing you joy right now, and it can be spiritual or
Mm.
silly or everything in between.
We are taking, my daughter just graduated, my third just graduated
Uh,
high school. And so we are taking a trip with our family in the next few days. I'll be packing, and I cannot wait to just get away with them and not work for a few
mm.
days. And we're going to go see the world together. So I can't wait for that.
That's awesome. Your whole family's going?
Yeah, my son, actually my youngest son, who's 15, he's gonna be at summer camp. And so it's kind of more of an adult vacation now because my
Yeah.
daughter's 19. But we're gonna miss him a lot. But he was okay with it. He was like, y'all go to those boring
Yeah.
places.
Yeah.
I'll go have fun at camp. So yeah. So
It works out.
it'll be all my grown kids though. And one of them's married and my son-in-law. So yeah, it's harder to get away now that they all have jobs and
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
So
Well, y'all have a fantastic time.
thank
Again, I'm
you.
thankful for your time. Y'all go get Untangle Your Emotions if you haven't, and get out of your head. That's sort of depending on what sort of side of the
Yeah.
scale your bend is. They're both, as we said at the beginning, just it's an invitation to live fuller. I think that was my experience. So
I'm so glad. Well, thank you, Maddie.
yeah, thanks, Jenny.